Namaste and welcome back to Waking Up with Mindful Serenity, and I'm going to continue the little exercise of answering a question from the jar. I must have answered, I don't know, over 200? I don't even know how many videos I have up there, but I know I've been answering, and I want to stress again that I am no expert. I'm answering these questions mostly as a learner, trying to assimilate my learning with the hope as well that what I have to say and what I've learned may be a benefit to somebody else, right? We're all in here to serve each other. We're all in this together, more or less. And I love the saying, and I forget who said it, that we're all walking each other home. So I love that, and I love the idea of doing that. So yeah, I share as I learn, and I learn as I share. So that's what you get. And of course, these are very off the cuff, impromptu. I'm not editing, not revising. I'm just getting the answer and getting the question and doing my best to answer it. So they are far from perfect as well. So anyway, I will reach into the jar and I will pull out a question. And the question I pulled out was, why is guilt unhealthy when it comes to growing spirituality? Yeah. Why is guilt unhealthy when it comes to growing spiritually? It's a good question. I'm not sure if I can answer it well, but I'm going to try. I'll start by taking a nice deep breath. Trying to get that ego out of the way, and that wiser part of self that's in all of us to come up and do the answering. Wow. Why is guilt unhealthy when it comes to growing spiritually? First of all, I like to talk a little bit about guilt and the difference between guilt and shame, maybe, or what guilt really comes from. Most of us would say in our society that guilt is a healthy thing. It keeps us on the straight and narrow. It keeps us from, going against the social sanctions of our society. And we all have social sanctions in our society. We have a moralistic set of rules, whether you go by the Ten Commandments, for example, or some other set of rules, but a set of rules that allow society to function in a healthy way, and that would say, okay, this is what you can do and this is what you can't do. And we really stress the we can't do's in our society, and that's what sanctions do. They help to bring about what is right and what is wrong and stop us from, venturing over to the wrong side, what's so-called wrong. Of course, social sanctions are going to be relative to the society you belong to. What might be normal and sanctioned in one society may not be considered normal or sanctioned in another. And say, for example, the code of conduct in a prison is different than the and they do have a code of conduct. A code of conduct in a prison system. Believe me, I know. I worked in there for a while, and I was able to observe that. But they also have, it may differ from the code of conduct that you would find, say, in a religious community. So again, it is relative. But that being said, we have this sense of what is right and what is wrong. And we have this sense of guilt or remorse that is required of the individual who partakes in something that breaches these social sanctions when they do something that we deem as wrong as a society. And depending on how wrong it is, how severe the incident is, how much it goes against society, that will be dependent on that particular society and the people who are judging in that society. So to make guilty is what's required to make guilty are judges. And we know in a court of law we have one person who's assigned to judge the moral doings of an individual, whether they breach society or social sanctions or not. And that I perfectly respect. But many of us take that judgment into our everyday lives and have a tendency of judging people and judging ourselves and making guilty. A Course in Miracles says this: making guilty is the greatest punishment we give to other human beings. It enforces this idea of separation and individuation. It enforces this idea that we are our bodies and our personalities and what these bodies and personalities choose to do. it enforces the separateness between one body and another. If I'm judging you for doing what I consider wrong, I can feel a little ego boost, and my personality gets a little bigger and a little bit more expansive because, hey, I judged you in a way, so therefore I am morally superior to you. And that's where self-righteousness and whatnot comes to play. Guilt then is unhealthy in spirituality. But first of all, it's an unhealthy emotion. It really doesn't do any good. Not in the way that we perceive guilt and how we are culturally, in most cases, conditioned to perceive guilt and to experience guilt. Guilt is the doing of wrong. You did something wrong. And of course, with that, there is this connotation, though it may not be expressed outwardly, that because you did something wrong, you are wrong. Because you did something so-called bad, you are bad. And of course, that bridges on the shame, and shame and guilt often go hand in hand. Shame is more related to how we are, this experience of being wrong. Guilt is the experience of doing wrong. Okay. Though guilt can help to some degree in continuing social sanctions, so to keep the society healthy, it can be enough in many cases to stop people from acting out and doing what they may be harmful or offensive to society. So guilt does probably serve some benefit that way behaviorally. But what it does to the individuals, it again creates this idea of separation between you and I, but it increases the inherent conditioning we also have that we are sinful, inherently so, that we are bad, inherently so, that we are wrong, inherently so, and that we are unworthy of the rewards of being good. And there, heaven, and we have to work our way to heaven in some cultures. And of course, it depends again. Morals and ideas are all relative to the cultures we come into. But I'm speaking mostly to Western society and the society I grew up in. So guilt then is the sense of being, if it triggers shame, and it triggers that shame response, and we go from thinking what we did was wrong to feeling that we are wrong, goes from triggering that what we did was shame, bad, and coming to this understanding that we are bad, then guilt is definitely not good for the spiritual developing person, because we want to get beyond, first of all, this idea of right and wrong and become a little bit more non-dualistic. We want to be able to go from judging to true empathy and compassion, seeing that what that other person did, we are just as capable of doing, so that instead of feeding this ego we have that wants to redeem itself, and instead of pushing down the ego of the other that has a tendency to go down, down, down into the depths of darkness and shame, we are doing away with judgment, and we are looking at that individual as an extension of ourselves, and knowing that whatever they've done, all but for the grace of God go I. All but for the grace of God go I. That we are just as capable of partaking in the behaviors they have underwent or took up. Okay, regardless of how offensive we think it is, we can look at some of the most offensive things in this society, like pedophilia or, rape or murder, and just things that are just like, people exploiting themselves in public in an inappropriate way. We could judge all that as being, terribly wrong. And it is. The behavior itself is wrong. The behavior itself is harmful. If we harm any human being in what we do, then that is, in a sense, if we want to use the right-wrong terminology, wrong. It doesn't benefit society for sure, and it doesn't benefit the perpetrator at all. Okay? It keeps us from experiencing who we truly are. It keeps us stuck in psyche in these very low-level needs of, whatever they are that led us to do that. They don't allow us to advance and grow beyond the psyche, beyond the personality, beyond these innate and animalistic behavior tendencies we all have, to the higher consciousness, right? So that the behavior itself is not healthy, but this guilt making and this guilt ownership is also prevents us from growing, because we see it almost keeps us trapped in this idea that we are wrong and bad, and therefore we may relive a self-fulfilling prophecy and then not seek to redeem ourselves. We see that the re-entry into prison rates are extremely high, not because the individuals themselves are bad, but because they have been conditioned to believe that they are bad. Not just that they committed the crime, but because they were locked away, pushed away, with other individuals who have done things like they have done or worse, then they come to believe and associate themselves with this idea that they're bad. So they go from guilt to shame, whether they act it out or not, whether they show remorse or not, whether they admit to their guilt or not, that's another thing. But they have a tendency to go from guilt to shame. And that shame-based personality keeps them stuck in the behavioral tendencies that they have. They can't see themselves as good. They can't see themselves as this innate higher being that is within, beyond all our personalities, whether you have the best personality in the world like Mother Teresa, or whether you've committed the most atrocious crime, say against children. The individual is the persona, the act that did it, but the being beneath that is the same in all of us, right? It's good, it's God. And we lose touch with that when we focus on the behavior and what that individual has done. And when we make people guilty, they may go from guilt to shame and own that, and they may stuck in the perpetual tendency to commit such offensive acts because they don't see who they truly are. They see themselves as this personality who's going to just keep doing these terrible things. And we are not the personalities that do these things. They are not the personalities that do these things. They are the being within, watching the personality and the body do and commit these crimes that are offenses against the society that are so worthy of, we say, as guilt and guilt making and penalty and punishment. Now, I'm not saying that we allow people to act any way they want to act in a society. No, we need our social sanctions. We need to keep a healthy going society. We need to say, for now, because we're dualistic in our own mentality as personas and personalities, that yes, this is right and this is wrong, and we have to say this is acceptable and this is unacceptable in a society. I love how the Buddhists use their own terminology to use and describe what's right and wrong, what is skillful and what is wholesome, what will allow everyone to grow in compassion and kindness and evolve more into the true self, and what will be unskillful in doing so. We want people to be wholesome. We want the society to be wholesome. We want people to get beyond the persona that is seldom wholesome, no matter how it comes off, to get to the being that is always wholesome. And at the same time, that requires a certain level of skill. So we are building skills, and we're trying to allow the human persona to behave a certain way and whatever. So is what they do skillful or unskillful, rather than is what they do bad, simple, wrong, offensive, judge it, awful. I will never do that, But it is important, I think, regardless of what the crime is. And say if something you would never do, and you know in your heart you would never do it, you still have no right to judge somebody else who has slept there, because you don't know where they came from. You don't know what circumstances have led to that. You don't know why or what they're doing, or why they're doing what they're doing. And there's usually a story. Of course, it's attachment to the story that causes this behavioral, tendency, and it's still attachment to the story that causes us to judge. And we do need to eliminate story as we eliminate that which is in the way of us experiencing our wholesome beings. But at the same time, we just have to be mindful that we can't judge, and we can't make guilty others simply because they've done something that we say hurt us, or someone we love, or someone we know, or someone we don't even know. We are not in the position to judge. Yes, we can elect a person in a court system to judge behavior and to penalize for the sake of society. But, judging in itself is something that we try to avoid at all costs. Neither right or wrong, Not that we we like the behavior, not that we accept the behavior or tolerate the behavior. But this making guilty is something we really need to consider when we're advancing spiritually. Well, I know I went to 15 minutes. Sorry about that. Thank you so much for joining me. I hope you have a wonderful day. Namaste. I have a hard time shutting off here. Sorry.